I'm Rob Pugaros. I lead the data and AI team at Transparency. And today's session really is to just answer some customer questions that we've seen in the past few months. So we've had a lot of people ask about Power BI and how to build pipelines, how to build out resources, and how to generally move data. So what I've designed here is a small demo that will show how to build out the resources, the infrastructure, how to take some sample data, load it into a SQL server, and then we'll connect that to Power BI. We won't spend ages on Power BI making it pretty, but we'll do a basic report and go through that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is build a resource group. And a resource group is a logical container of resources. We need to give it a name and a location. So for all of the stuff that we're going to build today, we're going to go with UK South. Generally, when I build resources, and I'm sure everyone else that does this will tag it as RG, and for today we'll call it that. I'm not going to add any tags, don't need to do that. And then we'll review and create. So it's validated, so we'll create that resource group, and then we can add some resources to it. So we take a quick look. At the moment, there's nothing in there, but it's built. So the next stage is a storage account. Well, I'm going to go through this quite quickly. So for any questions, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll try and answer as they're building. So we're going to create a basic storage account. So we need our resource group that we've just built. We'll give it a name. So storage. Try and keep the same naming convention across all of the resources. So if it lets us build that one. UK South. Lots and lots of different options, but for now we'll just keep everything basic. So we're going to go for the standard performance. We don't require anything really super fast access or low latency, just for the demo. And the advanced option. So for people that are interested, if you were to build an instance of Databricks or Synapse, you'd want to enable hierarchical namespaces. So, but for this, we don't need to. And then the rest of it will keep standard. So for the demo, we'll enable access from all networks. Depending on different customer projects, we might want to lock it down completely in VNets or with subnets, but for this we won't. Data protection. So there's a handy feature in that it does soft deletes, and you can change the latency on that. So if you do accidentally delete files, you can go in and reclaim those. Encryption. So probably really useful to point out that everything is encrypted as standard. When you create one of these storage accounts, you do have options, but for now we'll just use the standard Microsoft encryption. And again, tags we don't need. If anyone's not come across tags are really useful for assigning attributes to your resources, and then when you look at your costings or budgets, you can use those tags to break that down. Okay, so we'll review that. So we've passed validation, so we'll create that. Take a few moments to create. So while that's creating, I've gone off and got some sample data. So there's a weather data set and some taxi information that it's available in several different places, but Microsoft offer it, and this just follows a few days worth of taxi data. So in terms of trips, when they started, when they ended, the cost of the fare, tips, and then there's another data set that we can join to it that's been filtered on that location. I think it's New York, and we get a little bit of weather information. And the idea is that we're going to eventually create a report off that. But now that's finished. So this storage container has been built. Now what we want to do is create a container. So container, again, is another a logical separator for a set of folders or files or blobs. So we'll call this sample data. Used to be lowercase. We'll create that. So there's our container. So we can put some files in there now. So we'll upload that. And then on the right, we have upload blob. And because I've done it previously, it automatically knew where to go. So you would just point to that data and we'll upload that. Okay, great. So we've now got our resource group, we have a storage account, and we've got some data in our storage account. So the next step is to build out the SQL server. So we're going to use the Azure SQL Server. Again, we'll pick our resource group. We'll add in the server name. We'll see if we can do SQL webinar. It's probably not the most original name, but it's there, so we can take that. We'll use SQL authentication. So we'll do SQL admin. And then the password. Okay, so this will create the server. So in networking, for now, we'll allow Azure services and resources to access this server because we want it to talk to Data Factory, and then we'll use that in a minute. There are other things and considerations that we might do in different projects, but for this demo, we'll do that. Not interested in Defender for this purpose. And then we'll review and create it. So this just creates the server, and then the database that we create after this is where we choose things like compute and storage space. And this will take a few moments to build. So unfortunately, we need that to build before we can go on to the next stage, but it takes a couple of moments.
So while you're stopped there is a question just asking why SQL Server.
Why SQL? Just for the demo. So when we do the database, in fact, we can do it now. I wanted something small that didn't cost too much money, and I can show you that actually. So if I just give this, so if I go to SQL database, we've got our server. So we're going to create a database now.
There is another question there as well, Robert. So do we need to create a new server for all Power BI projects?
It's really project dependent. So if you've got data in your storage account, you can access it directly from Power BI. You may want to do some work with that data to transform it, in which case we would recommend using Data Factory and SQL Server. Again, you can do a lot in Power BI. That may not be the case. The demo here is only 2 tables. the honest answer there is it's really project dependent and data dependent. So we're gonna just choose a development workload, and this when I was looking at the demo, I was interested in this this part of it. So we get a lot of customers that are cost conscious, like we all are, and they might be doing an ETL that only runs once a day. And the nice thing about this option is it gives us the ability to choose the compute resource that we want. So we have a tier that's provisioned. It'll allocate resources, and those resources are available all the time. So if you've got something that's transacting very frequently and needs to be available all the time, you would select that. In this case, I want serverless. So if you had a task that ran once a day with your ETL, it might be that this is the better option, and it's billed per seconds based on the vCores. So for this demo now, I'm only going to use one vCore, and I don't need much data at all. I think it's megabytes, but we'll put in 10 gigabytes. And again, in terms of cost, you can see the cost there. So per vCore per second, and this can be more cost efficient than having something provisioned. So if you've got something provisioned and you're paying several $100s a month and you're only using it once a day, it might be worth considering the serverless option. So we'll add that in. Again, so backup redundancy for the demo, we'll just go with local. I'm going to add my IP in, and we'll see if that works. So when I connect in a moment to Management Studio, it will probably fail and want me to add my IP in, despite selecting it here, but we'll see. Lots of options here, and again, that's project dependent, but for the demo, we'll just keep it standard. If you wanted to restore, you can restore from a backup, or you can add sample data. But again, we don't need to do that for this demo. Tags, we'll leave those. We'll just check that it's validated, and then we'll create that. So that database will create, and what we'll do is we'll check that it all works. So we'll load up Management Studio.
Robert, can we just rewind there for a moment? Just a couple of things to follow up on. Obviously, Bridget had asked about the need to create a server for all Power BI projects. So just then, so generally, can we access documents directly from the network?
Yeah, you can. So yes, you can. If you've got those documents and they're in a format that you can report off and you're happy with them, you can.
And then follow up from Isaz. In terms of cost, if you ETL output dataset to Excel and upload to a cloud repository, then use Power BI to connect to Excel with a daily refresh, does it save in cost as there's no fee for using the Excel data sheet?
I'm going to say yes, but I would want to check that first. In theory.
Okay. Isaz, we'll come back to you on that. Okay. And then from Delroy, I think so. We use the REST API to connect PBI to Dynamics, and that seems to work fine for refreshing daily. So
yeah, we've seen that with other customers. So I guess the purpose of the demo is we're not saying this is the exact solution for every project. This is just a demo based on some customer feedback where people have wanted to know how to just move some data from a CSV into a SQL Server and into Power BI. There's a lot going direct into the source system or to a file storage system is absolutely fine as well if it works for your company, your project, and then that's cool. Okay, so that's built our database for us. Our server name is in the top right, so we're going to take that, and I've got Management Studio on my other screen, which I'll bring across in a second. I'll just okay. So it has asked me for my IP. So what I'm going to do is we'll go to our resource group, go to our SQL Server, and then on the left-hand side, there's networking. And what it wants me to do is add my IP address in. So if I add that in, I'll be able to connect. And so I've connected now. So we we have our database and we have our empty tables. So we know we've got our SQL Server running and ready to go now. So the next step is to move some data, and we're going to do that by using Data Factory. So we'll create a Data Factory. So same thing. Our region is always in this instance going to be UK South. The name, yeah. See if that's available. Someone's taken it. That's better. Okay. Git configuration. So you can hook up Data Factory to Git, whether it's Azure DevOps or GitHub. We do that with other customers, and we have CI/CD pipelines running off that, moving the instance of dev Data Factory or Synapse as well, from a dev test to prod environment. Networking, at the moment, we'll just leave this as standard. All of this will be standard, and we'll create our Data Factory. It shouldn't take too long. Okay, so that's complete, and we'll just do a quick refresh. So what we've got, let's refresh that. It said it had done it. Let's just check quickly. There it is. Okay, so we've got our storage account, our SQL Server, our database, and now our Data Factory. And what we're going to do is move some data from here into this database. We're going to do that with Data Factory. So if we launch the studio, okay, so there's a few options. So we need to build a pipeline, but we also need to connect to our data sources or sinks. So before I start building a pipeline, I'm going to connect to the storage account that we created. So we'll create a link service to that. Should show up there. So I've just selected the subscription, the storage account name, and tested the connection. So that's our first link service. Second link service. So I'm going to connect to our Azure SQL database. So again, from subscription, we just pick out our options. So authentication, we know is SQL. So I'll just put the credentials in.
Robert, there's a question there from Delroy. By setting UK South as the region, does that ensure your data stays in UK servers?
Yes. Yeah. So there's UK South and UK West, and depending on different customers, different organisations, that they might be open to having data in different areas outside of the UK, but we have two that we can use that ensure that data stays in the UK.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just create this linked service. So we've now connected to our storage account and our SQL server and the database. We've checked that works. So what we're going to do now is build a pipeline. Okay, so we've got lots of options. I recognise a few names on the on the list of customers that I've done this with, so I'm sure I've seen this before. So what we're going to do is we'll copy the weather data first. Our pipeline will just originally call copy data, and we're going to have two copy activities. So this is going to be copy weather data. So our source, we need to create a new source data set. So our source data set will come from blob storage. It's delimited text. And we'll call this. And we've just created our linked service. And we can just use this little folder, this little browse button to pick our data, and it will fill in the file path for us. So it's filled that in for us. I know the first row is header, so we'll select that and then just press OK. So that's been created, and we can test that. So there's this handy little preview data button here, so we can see that our data has been populated in this preview data option, so we know that works. The next option is the sync. So we want to put that in our SQL Server database. So we find the option for Azure SQL. This will we'll tag as weather. Now the table name, I'm not going to because the table doesn't exist, I can't pick it out. So the schema will leave us the standard DBO schema, and we'll call the table weather. And I don't want to import the schema because it doesn't exist. So if we open this now, we can test the connection, but we can't preview the data because that table doesn't exist yet. And there's an option in the sync here to auto create table. And we're going to use that. And then it will create a table for us, but it won't necessarily be correct. And we'll go in and change what we need to change. But that's the weather data done. The nice thing is about Data Factory is you can still do a copy and paste. So we're going to copy that activity, and we're going to change it, and we're going to change it to do our taxi data. So the source, we need to change the source. We need a new source. So this is blob storage again, delimited text, name, taxi data, and we'll use the linked service that we've created. We'll browse to the file, and then the first row is header, and then we'll check that data, we'll preview it. Okay. So that's worked, so that's okay. And then the sync, we'll do the same thing. So we'll create a new data set, a taxi data set that points to that SQL database. Taxi. So DBO, we'll call that yellow taxi. Don't want to import the schema, but we'll open that and just test the connection. Okay. And again, this is set to auto create table. There's a couple of handy features that are worth pointing out. So if anyone's on SSIS, it used to be that if you wanted to clear or truncate a table before, you had to have an execute SQL task. Now you can just put it into this box in the sync, and it will run that pre-copy script first. You can do upserts, and you can use stored procs to insert your data as well, which is really handy. What we need to do is publish these changes. So publish that.
Robert, Mike has asked there, can you select an entire folder rather than files if the data has the same headers?
Yeah, and you can. So there is a so under this is going to test me now. There's a for each option or a switch. So if you've got a folder and you've got a load of files in it, you can go through each one of those files and iterate through. That's possible.
Just what he was saying back to you.
Okay, so we've published that now. So let's run it.
And out there, did you select an existing data set or source for this, or as a source for this?
For the second one, I set up the link services, and we created new data sets for each one of those copy data. So in here, so that's a new one for the weather one. Then when I copied the activity, I made a new one for the taxi one. And we can watch this data moving. So what I was saying a moment ago is that one, it queues and it waits for some resource, and then it will run the pre-copy script, and then it will transfer the data, which is what it's doing now. So it's written this many rows. If we refresh that, that's there. That's succeeded now. So there's some useful information here. You can see how many rows of written, how much data's moved. But that pre-copy script I mentioned, you can see the execution queue there. Okay, so that's worked. So what we can do now is come back to our management studio, refresh that, and what we'll have is we'll have two tables full of data. So we have that, and this one as well. Okay, so there was something that I wanted to point out. So when you use that auto create, it's a little bit. I was going to say it's a little bit lazy. It's probably not fair. It just chucks everything into the table as text, which isn't correct for some of these columns. So we need to change them. So the way I do that is I'll use the drop and create table command. Because this is our first run and it's only a small amount of data, if we were doing this in a larger project outside of a demo, I would have looked at the data beforehand. But because we're short on time, this is the quicker way of doing it. So we need to just change these columns so that they're not all strings. So year, month. And then these will all be, we can just make these decimals. Make them to 2 decimal places. So we'll run that. So that will drop the data, drop the table and recreate it. Didn't like that. I'm not sure why it's put that there. Okay, and then we'll do the same for the yellow taxi. So we'll get the script. And we'll look at the data. This one will take a little bit longer. So vendor ID is an integer. We've got some date times. Another integer. Then decimal for the trip distance.
Rob, we just have a question coming in from Alex. Alex, do you want to come off mute and ask away?
Hi there. Thank you very much. Again, thanks for the presentation as well, guys. Just whilst you're doing that, I was just wondering, as a strategic point for creating like the pipelines to Power BI, is there a movement away from creating the old like data warehouse structures, or like in terms of so you can create data sets like directly from like say queries from a copy of an operational database, say, rather than building out like entire like data structures if you're just like reporting from a singular source? As technology has moved on, is that kind of an approach now, or would you say that actually creating those data structures to begin with is the best way to go in almost all circumstances?
No, not necessarily. I mean, there's no point creating a data warehouse or a model if it's not needed. If you've got an operational data store and you know that data
last installment would have been October and she's only just cancelled it, hasn't she?
Is usable and reliable and it gives you what you need, then use it, I would say.
I think so, and I think you could run that.
Was that okay, Alex?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Payment type. Okay, so we've just got a few more columns. Yeah, I'm quite a believer of not over-engineering things and keeping it as simple as possible. So if there's no need to add in certain technologies or certain structures, then don't. I'm sure we've all seen plenty of over-engineered solutions in IT. I think these are all decimals and then int. Let's just run that. So we've changed those tables now, and I won't save that. Leave this one. What we need to do now is go back and rerun this. So let's just run that and put the data back in. Just wait for this to finish. So even though I've selected that tiny instance, which was between half and one vehicle and very small data, we've still we've still moved quite a large amount of data, say relatively quickly. So if you've got an ETL that runs once a day and can be left for some time overnight, it's certainly the more cost efficient way of doing it. So let's just have a look at our data. So I don't have many rows in here, but that's fine. And that's all gone on okay. So we've got our correct data types now, which will help us in Power BI. So on my other screen, I'll just move this across. I've loaded up Power BI. I'm conscious of time, so I'll do this very quickly. So we'll get data. We'll get it from SQL Server. And I'll go back into Azure, and I'll go to the database, get the server name. Just take a moment. So there's our database. We're going to load in these two tables. We can preview them, but we'll load them in for now. Okay. And what we're going to do is very quickly transform this data. So what I want to just ensure is that this is the date, and this one is the date. Which is and so I want to connect this date in the weather table to this pickup date. There isn't enough data really in this to, so we'll just make that both, and we'll just very quickly add some data in here. So set that in as a card. So if we were doing this properly, what we would do is come in here and rename each one of these columns. We'd hide the ones that aren't that interesting, and let's put in date. Do a quick graph. So I want the total amount of the money that's been spent per date, and there's only three, despite that 500,000 rows, only 3 days worth of data in there. I'm going to stop there. I don't want to spend ages in Power BI. That really includes the fact that we can take data from CSV and use SQL Server, Data Factory, and then connect it to Power BI. I guess, are there any questions?
Yeah, so I've had Kazi's been answering some of the questions there, but we can put them to you as well. So Scott Mullet has asked, is the spin up or price per second fixed, or is it based on the time of day it is run as well?
It's fixed.
David had asked, could you have loaded the CSV direct into Power BI desktop?
Yes, yeah, you can. You go straight from CSV into Power BI.
Perfect. And Azadi has asked, what then is best practice for refreshing the data and for publishing to users?
Okay, so best practice on refreshing your data, that really depends on your how frequently that data is updated based on your source system and how often your users require that updated. So with most reporting, there's usually a lag, and that ETL will run overnight. We have done some recent work with customers where they want real-time reporting or near real-time reporting. Depending on the license you've got with Power BI, if you're doing a standard data load, I think on the highest tier license you can refresh the data set every 30 minutes. If you need something more frequent, you can use the real-time data sets that they offer.
Perfect. And Mike has asked, is it possible to connect Azure sign-in logs to Power BI in real time?
I've not actually done that, but if that data is readily available, then I'm going to say yes. So if those logs are in a storage account, then you can certainly hook that up.
All the questions that are in at the moment.
Okay. I'll stop sharing.
If anybody has any questions, do shout up, put your hand up. We can ask. We've got a few minutes left over. David, go ahead.
Sorry, just a quick one. We've been asked to roll out Power BI to do some kind of data analytics across the company. Do you have any recommendations on the best kind of training resources? Because I've looked at the Microsoft stuff and it seems to be quite basic very quickly, rather than a quick deep dive would be really handy.
Yeah, so training, I mean, it's obviously something we can help with. Outside of that, there's lots and lots of stuff on Google and YouTube, and I think you're right. The Microsoft documentation is good, but personally, I'd like to see things in action to learn it. I learn in a different way, but there's lots of resources, and if we take this offline, we can probably point you in the direction of something that will help. We can have a third conversation.
Yeah, David, we will contact you later. We do have a training division within Transparency to cover off these sort of things, so we can have a chat, or your assigned account manager will give you a call and discuss the options. And if it's a case of working with us for that, we can do that, or as Robert said, point you in other directions. Scott has asked, at what point would you switch from CSV Direct into Power BI to doing it this way? What are your rules rationale that you use?
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer. So again, it's really project dependent, and even down to your infrastructure and how reliable is the data in that CSV? How often is it refreshed? Does it need to connect to other data sets? I'm just trying to think of examples where I've gone direct to CSV, and generally I'll have something in the server, or if it's file format, I'll be using Parquet, and we'll be using a serverless pool to read that and then present it to Power BI. It's very, very project dependent.
Perfect. We'll have somebody else in there. Graham Smith.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for the demo. Much appreciated. It's just a very quick question, and it falls very similar to Scott's query. At what point would you determine to use Databricks versus Synapse to do your ingestion and your analytics?
Okay, that's a big question.
Sorry.
So, so keeping it really simple, if we were doing a project that was heavily data science related, I would go with Databricks. The reason I go with Databricks is for things like model management, promoting your models and the CI/CD, the ML ops. I won't say it's better; it's a bit more intuitive. But the offering in Synapse for Spark is, I don't think it's their latest version. I think they've kept the latest version for Databricks. But if you're building those models out and promoting them, Databricks has certainly got the better options for that model management. It's also got the SQL endpoints now, which is really handy. But if you're data warehousing and you want more power and you want that distributed computing, then I would recommend Synapse. But it really depends on future proofing your IT roadmap and where you see yourself going in terms of ML and data science, which is becoming more and more popular with everyone.
Okay, good. Cheers. Thanks, Rob.
Oh, sorry, costs as well, I would say.
And that, yes,
well.
and that.
Yeah, costs as well.
Yeah. Cheers.
Excellent. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, I'm going to launch a final poll. We are obviously there's been quite a few attending here, but we are in a position to contact anyone that does have any further questions. For spend some time with you to go in on a one-to-one basis. Put that on there.
Yeah. So I appreciate I've gone through quite a lot of stuff there very quickly as well. So if there are questions that you want to take offline, feel free to contact us.